Welcome back to Eldest Daughter, a podcast in discovery of what makes a cycle breaker. Per usual, I am your host, Kendra Austin. And today we'll be talking about and diving into the identities, choices, and experiences that go in to becoming the person who creates the role that you want to have versus the one that was given to you. You guys might notice that every single week I say that a little bit differently, and that's because it means something different to me. I'm living, I'm learning. Take notes. Before we hop into today's discussion, I did want to address what is the elephant in the room, but also the most important thing that we are witnessing now and perhaps in the last 75 to 100 years. I'm already kind of starting to cry, whether or not you are watching this or listening to this. I am going to be reading the majority of this statement because for once in my life, I do not have words that flow easily or that don't create a frog in my chest and in my throat. But this is not an apolitical space, and nothing that I am involved with ever will be, because to be human is to involve yourself with other humans and their well-being. I do want to be clear that I have zero interest in engaging in a conversation or discourse where we're hosting a conversation pitting Palestinian liberation against the safety of the Jewish diaspora. However, a framework for liberation, as laid out by our foremothers, doesn't even allow that to be true. I will say that watching an entire population of people torn from their homes in service of imperial violence has never sat right with me in all of the years that I have studied this crime. Watching those same people offered no other option but divine intervention or death is poisoning me from the inside out. And if you are paying attention, if you have a beating heart, it should be doing the same to you. This is the kind of grief that can only be alchemized into action or empathy for all, as the Palestinian people are begging of us, begging of me. I am calling for a ceasefire and to an end of the occupation. I am asking for the return of Palestinian lineages that have been completely wiped from this earth into systemically cloaked silence and darkness. And this is a tall order for even God himself. I am asking that we don't harden, that we don't desensitize. Watching people buried under rubble is not normal, and it never will be. I ask that you not turn away from these stories, as brutal as they may be. Listen intently to your neighbors, local and global. Become acquainted with grief, because we will be transformed by it if we choose the hard route for once in our natural and privileged lives. In the future, there are Palestinian people. In the future, we call a genocide before we have to watch it happen. In the future, there are Palestinian homes, one that can be identified and seen on a fucking map. In the future, we will listen to each other before it is too late, and in the future, there is no too late. Do not choose your own shame for having privilege, for knowing less than you hoped you would at this time, for realizing there is still work to be done. Do not let this stop you from being called to shift history toward an outcome that we can all be proud of. You are more than that. We are more than that. And that is the whole point. I am completely leveled and grounded by witnessing what's happening in Gaza and West Bank and the many other genocides that we have become aware of that are happening right now. And I'm also incredibly moved by how many people, for the first time in their lives, are choosing to take the hard route. And I want to acknowledge that now. Anyway, of course, I love you.
I love you.
So, with that being said, I want to ease into a gorgeous conversation with a beloved guest. You guys know I always say that. Bita Eghbali.
I'm the most beloved.
That's right. You are the most beloved. And I won't let that be unsaid and unheard now. Bita has lived 1,000 lives, as a Gemini always does. A former political photojournalist turned makeup artist, and now the face of joy in creator partnerships at Snapchat. You're here with us today to share your many gifts and your many insights.
We're just doing what we do best.
It's true.
Talk it the hell up.
We're talking it the hell up.
Every day, you're the first person that sees me in the morning when you FaceTime me.
That's right.
I'm often the last person that talks to me before I go into it.
And it's a joy. It's a joy. It's
I
a
love
joy.
it. And I love you.
I love you, babe. So I want to address another elephant in the room, which is that Bita is the daughter of Dariush, the one and the only.
Sure am.
The one and the only. And I wanted to enter with that, not because it's at the forefront of your identity or the way that you move in the world, but because it is, of course, your foundation.
Yes.
And also because I feel that I have been awarded the privilege of watching you navigate what's happening in the world as a child of somebody who has taken the hard route.
Absolutely. My dad's been living in exile for 45 years. So to say the last few weeks have been difficult is an extreme understatement. But at the same time, it's not a new narrative. It's not a new story for people who are aware of this conflict. And also my mother, her side of the family, they came to the US by way of political asylum. So this is a deeply important issue to me, as all things in the Middle East are, I think, especially because of US intervention.
Of course.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, Dariush is an icon and a legend for Iranian people, for the Arab-speaking world, the Arabic-speaking world.
Just actually Farsi.
Farsi.
Yeah, it's Farsi-speaking world. I do think that a lot of people in the Arab-speaking world in the Middle East know who he is.
Right.
But he really speaks to the Iranian population, and he tours everywhere. His feet touch the ground everywhere but his homeland. And I cannot wait to see the day where we all go back. It's my biggest dream in my life, to see him back in his homeland and to be there with him.
And so it is.
Yeah,
and so it is. I can't wait for that.
I can't wait.
He gained a lot of notoriety and popularity as the people's princess. As the people's prince.
Yep.
Because of his advocacy for protests against the Iranian political system and also in support of asylum seekers.
Absolutely.
He's somebody who's chosen principle time and time again in a way that has been incredibly challenging for not just him, but his family.
Yeah.
And that is why now I feel like that weight, that heaviness, and also the I think like the simpler choice for you seems very clear in your personality. You are somebody in learning what matters to you and understanding your value systems, I've realized puts your morality first, your integrity first. It's quite a simple choice. And I'm curious about how much watching your family navigate crises, joys, also just like the life of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, how much that has impacted your personality and your character.
It informs everything about me, I think. I think that with my parents, both of them are very rock and roll, like in their own way. And actually their energies together, although they're not together anymore, but they were very iconic.
Right.
But they were always about like empowering the people, and they're very much for the people. They're very much fuck the system.
Absolutely.
And that's really where a lot of this like rebellious spirit and identity I think that I have is, although I'm like not a very loud rebel, I think I'm just like a quiet rebellion. And yeah, it's they to me, my parents are so deeply part of my identity, obviously because they conceived me and they had me. But I do feel like ever since I was growing up, a lot of the things people would tell me about me. So you have your dad's eyes, you have your mom's lips, you have your mom's eyebrows. These like physical attributes, like they actually sunk in much deeper in my identity. Like I really felt like I embodied both of them my whole life. And that's actually, I did go to therapy to really unravel that and unlearn that, because I'm like trying to walk in my own path also. If that,
that is really profound. That is really profound. And you and I talk about, like we're both very spiritual.
We sure are.
And esoteric. And that's, I feel like the foundation of our connection. Like I've noticed that you tend to see the bigger picture with everything that somebody says, every experience, every interaction. So I can only imagine that carrying through childhood up until adulthood, the projections of what you were intended to be weighed a lot on you, because you knew that that was important, and that if it was true for you, you would have to show up for it. How has it been kind of dismantling the expectation of becoming either of your parents, their paths, their personalities, their decisions? And what does it mean to walk in your own path now? Like, how are you honoring that?
Well, that's a great question, because I think this is actually my version of the Roman Empire. Like, this is what I think about every day, is the amount of love I have for both of my parents, but the amount of love I need to have for myself to keep walking in my path, which basically just means reconnecting with the things that make Bita happy, and especially 4-year-old Bita. Like, this is very emotional for me. I don't want to cry, because my glam is doing what
It's impeccable.
It needs to be doing.
But I also know that it is tear proof.
Yeah, it is.
Let's put some respect on her name.
Absolutely tear proof.
Let's put some respect on her name.
But it is a lot about the inner child. And this is something I think since I've known you, we've been talking about this. And I think as a child, I was extremely, what's that word? I was very insular. Like
introverted?
Introverted. And I think that I grew out of that in school, and going to, being part of an improv club in high school, and like Model UN and these types of programs. Girl Scouts. I was a Girl Scout till I was 18.
Did not know that.
And no one needs to know. But nobody needs to know. But I stayed for the cookies.
Absolutely. And she stays for the treats every
time, babe. And
the community.
Yeah. That's correct. But I think I grew out of my introverted self after I was the age of 4 or 5. And then I think now I'm about to turn 30 in June next year, as I'm a Gemini. So June 9th, shouts out. I think right now I'm like really, really feeling the closest in proximity to myself as a 4-year-old. Yes. And I can't explain it, but it's like, I feel like I'm just honoring my introverted side right now. I'm really just taking inventory and listening and trying to grow, because I really like the more I grow up, the more I know nothing. And I'm just, I guess, with my parents, to just go back to your question, with how they show up in my life and how I'm trying to unlearn all the things that I identify with them. I'm just trying to hold on to the parts of them that are extremely beautiful. And I think as a whole, they're both beautiful people. But I do sometimes see myself like turning into or embodying parts of them that I really want to release.
That are compulsive and not a choice.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, and the way I can do that is by just absolutely loving on my mom, absolutely loving on my dad, realizing that they're just people experiencing life for the first time. And even though they're wiser than me, and even though they know more than me, and they've been through a lot more than me, just even in a geopolitical sense.
Yes.
Spiritually, they've been through a lot too. And I think that I'm just holding on to that. And I'm just trying to grow with them spiritually versus the things that they've done that are tangible in this life.
The compassion and empathy required to hold space for yourself, and not just in a singular way, but in a multitudinal, three-dimensional, 4 and 5th dimensional way, and also your parents in all of those ways, is, I think, the greatest challenge we'll have in this lifetime. And I really, really commend the grace with which you are able to show up for that challenge, because it is so hard.
It is.
But also, as somebody who's a beneficiary of your energy, I feel that washing over me and the ability to do that. I wanted to kind of backtrack on a few things. I mean, the whole time you were talking, I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I want to get into. So we talk a lot about our inner child, because we both, I feel like, tend to that person a lot.
Yes.
And mostly because you and I have a shared experience of feeling like a little boss baby. you know, and feeling 1 million years old at 3.
Absolutely.
And also, I found that you and I both are kind of challenged at like doing a little bit of necromancy on the lost parts of ourselves in that young girl.
Yes.
And how much of that was like placed on us versus what we chose or what we were naturally.
Totally.
I'm curious about your current, and you don't have to be this for forever, which I know your Gemini ass knows anyway.
I'll do
But based on who you are today, I'm curious about your opinion on whether or not the deeply serious 4-year-old that you are kind of peeking into was naturally, or was she that because she needed to be, or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I really do. I think I've come to terms with that, and I have peace with that right now, because there was a period of time where I would obviously look back at my childhood and I was just like, I felt like I didn't have a childhood a lot. I felt like I was an adult very early on. As you said, in the most beautiful way, 1 million years old at the age of 3. I really feel that. I really feel like I was that when I was born.
We had a lot of very unique lived experiences.
Yes.
If you want to share any of them today.
I will.
I mean, every time I speak to you, I feel like I'd learn something new about you. Like finding out that you were born in New Mexico is my Roman Empire. I said, what do you mean?
No, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
No offense.
I know.
No offense to the indigenous folks, but that is crazy.
It's crazy. So when my parents were dating, you know, my dad was living part of the time in New Mexico and Albuquerque. His family owned a Persian rug shop in Albuquerque. So my mom,
slay,
against her family's wants and wishes, was like, all right, well, I'm going to be with my man.
She said, my man.
So she went and was with him there. And then they moved to LA very quickly. It was not a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question about is it nature or is it nurture, essentially, I think it's a bit of both. I think that I saw some shit at a very young age that I can't even recall now, that has informed probably the way that I move in this world. And I think, just as a blanket statement, I'm just going to say I recently realized how much of an impact someone with a drug addiction in the family has on you in your life. And I didn't realize that until very recently. And my dad is a former addict. He's a former alcoholic. And
which is such a beautiful part of his hero's journey. And
yeah, it's
very, very hard. I'm sorry to
no, that's okay.
But I do want to recognize how challenging it is. There are so many different versions of addiction that exist, and I would venture to say the vast majority of people
absolutely
have become a survivor of the grips that addiction takes over a family structure,
for sure,
and also over identity,
for sure,
and also the ultimate realization that like now we're adults, like those experiences were not things that you chose, not things that you should have ever had to endure. And I just want to acknowledge that now. And also now in adulthood are your responsibility.
Yeah.
And that is not fucking fun.
It's not fun. And I think it's something that like I knew I knew since I could remember, as far as I can remember, I knew that my dad struggled with addiction. This was not a secret growing up with my family. Mm-hmm. Like no one was trying to keep it from me. But with that being said, I think I put all the pieces together very recently, actually this year. I had a breakthrough. I don't want to call it a breakdown. It was really like a breakthrough for me. And I think that having somebody have a severe addiction, being a musical artist, touring with him,
right,
wondering why my parents were so volatile, like growing up, like what was going on. And like now I'm seeing everything very clearly. And it also just informs the way that I react to people's behaviors around me. It informs the partners I've probably wanted to choose in the past. And a lot of it is trying to pick people I can figure out that bring a little bit of chaos, a little bit of instability, a little bit of uncertainty, but at the end of the day, feel like they're a very loving person. Because someone with a drug addiction is not going to be a consistent They're not
No.
going to have consistent behavior.
No.
I will
And they're
say
not going to be emotionally safe.
No, they're not going to be emotionally safe, but I will say like I have a complex experience with my dad because he has never showed me anything but love. Like he is actually just like a deeply loving person.
Mhm.
And that's where the struggle is. It's like, how can you be this loving to me and you, I know you want the world for me. I know you have desires and wishes for me that even go beyond what I want for myself.
Mhm.
But how can you choose that? How can you choose
How can you
your
leave me here?
addiction? Like, I mean, that's also, I'm very aware that that's a really controversial thing to say because to a lot of people, it's not really a choice. It's an addiction.
Disease. Yeah.
And it's a disease. But I have a really hard time with it because I was a byproduct of this and and I had to experience it firsthand. So for me, I don't have a really easy time saying it was out of his hands.
Absolutely not. And I also want to acknowledge, I think that also when you say that, what I'm hearing as somebody who also grew up around a lot of addiction is it's not like you're choosing addiction versus me. It's that you are not choosing me in virtue of evading the tools potentially available.
Right.
Right. And I think in specific in the context of, you know, I think in any family structure, as somebody who is constantly having to bear the burden of the responsibility that an addict is not picking up,
Yeah.
you are seeing all of the tools available. You're seeing
Yeah.
all of the opportunities. Like that
Yeah.
is your view is like,
For sure.
how am I going to get out of here?
Yeah.
And you're wondering why the people who are tasked to take care of you cannot see those things.
Yes.
And I don't feel like it is your responsibility
No.
to continue to take that on or like to find the grace that I think ultimately, like, your dad would have to carry for
Yeah.
himself and would have to find for himself.
Yeah.
But I do think that ultimately it's like, I hear what you're saying about the controversy around addiction. I do think that ultimately the language is what has to change because while addiction may be a disease, much like any other ailment, we have to choose our treatment.
Yeah.
And it does overcome you in a way that in an average, I hate to say average disease, but a normalized, let's say normalized
Yeah.
sickness does not.
Right.
And a normalized compulsion, you can't expect it to take over you
Yeah.
in the same way. But like, yeah, I have so much empathy for that feeling of abandonment and kind of feeling left there.
Yeah.
I am also thinking so much about how connected that is to you tending to your inner child now
Yeah.
and becoming closer to yourself. I'm such a
Yes.
fierce believer that our inner child is ourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. You are who you are at the age of 4. When I see
Yes.
pictures of myself at the age of 4,
That's her.
I'm like that. I'm like looking at myself right now. And I haven't felt that way in 24 years.
Mm,
Literally.
wow.
You
I
know?
mean, yeah, it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And like I feel like that makes a lot of sense. I know for my own journey coming into like a lot of inner child work, it was revolutionary because as a young kid, I felt again 1 million years old. And I feel to some extent a part of that, or I want to say actually, I want to give some grace here to myself and that I do feel that the majority of that actually is my life path or is
Yeah.
my destiny. I am a very firm believer that a lot of us are sent here to parent our parents.
Totally.
And
Absolutely.
while I feel that both of my parents are so formidable in a very physical sense and so like they go the long way in their very age in a very physical sense,
Yeah.
I feel that I am spiritually their teacher.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like I came in here with that. I came in
Yeah.
here with that hard stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and at the same time, I know that I wanted to be older because I wanted to be safe.
Yeah.
I wanted to be older because I saw 30, 45, 50-year-old me as a me who had control over her surroundings, control over the emotional environment, control over who was taking care of me.
Yeah.
There was a very long time, though, that I operated on the premise of that really being very like isolated and cold, a very cold space where it was like I rejected everything else.
Yeah.
Nothing else could come near me. Safety meant nobody could be around me.
Yeah.
I didn't want anything to be able to infiltrate what I felt that the adults in my life were taking advantage of.
Absolutely.
And as I started to do that inner child work, I realized that that is my self-abandonment. Thinking that I should be thrown away into a dark closet somewhere so that the world doesn't see me or won't be able to take care of me is exactly what my parents did, is exactly what the adults in my life did, even in ways that like I can again show grace for now. I can honor now. It is the best they could with what they had. It still wasn't good enough, and I can say that confidently. But I do have compassion for that. But like it's been such a gorgeous experience to be able to like soften and create a tender landing space for that 4-year-old little girl.
For sure.
Because I am just like, you fucking had it. You had it, bitch. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You knew what it was.
You knew what I feel like I knew more then than I know now.
Absolutely.
As a 4-year-old, like my mom always jokes that whenever she would like ground me because she said I've only been grounded twice in my life, and honestly, I believe her. Once was in high school when I had like a D in algebra. She took away my phone for the whole summer, so that was one time.
Fair.
The time before, I like took these like roses that she had in the house, and I like they were like made out of a material. They weren't made out of, it wasn't a real rose. And I like tore the petals off and threw them in the lake by our place. She's like, that was the only other time I've ever grounded you. But like she jokes that anytime she felt like I was on a timeout or something like that, I would just go in my room. I would enjoy my time. I was like, yeah, okay, great. I'm going to watercolor now.
Right. I'm living, laughing, and
actually,
loving.
thank you for giving me time to create and be a creative and an artiste.
No. It's true. When you are a mature child, being grounded is simply time for self-reflection.
Yeah, I said, this is
I can do this.
This is my time to literally have a ball and take all the Crayola pens that you bought me, Crayola markers
to good use.
For a spin. Let's go. Let's give it a whirl. Like, please be serious. Like, thank you.
100%. And I'm sitting here creating a master plan for how we can move on past this conflict that you have with me.
Yes.
That is what I'm thinking about.
Yes.
In my groundedness, I was like, so here's the thing. It's clear that you and I are not seeing eye to eye.
Yeah. This is my perspective.
Right.
These are all the bullet points in which you are wrong.
Like you missed out on the potential for growth.
Yes.
And here we are.
And
my mom would say, fuck all that. You should mind your business.
My mom would be like, no.
Okay.
Like,
absolutely not. No, heart.
No.
I love that.
I know.
Okay. So let's fast forward a little bit. To current Bita, okay? Yes. Because there are a few things that I find very interesting. Namely, you know, again, your dad is the people's princess, okay?
Yes, he is.
And he's had a huge, huge obligation to a collective.
Yes.
In a way that most people don't get to experience their parents. Right? There's this huge division between self and the collective.
Yes.
As a fellow, I'm just going to say this, Dariush is an Aquarius. As a fellow iconic Aquarius, I am somebody that I feel like really intrinsically knows the friction and the pull between like I am doing for self and I am doing for the collective. Yeah. I'm letting the self-generated goodness and fulfillment be overflow for the people. It's very much a part of the life path.
Yeah.
I know that you have done a lot of this work yourself. And for one, as we say, you are the queen of beating the algorithm. You do that at Snap. But also in doing my little research, gosh. I did find out that a much younger Bita did do a TED Talk on having been the founder of a publication called Press Publication, where
I can't believe I'm being outed.
where you were digging into the hard issues.
Yeah, I was.
You really, really were. You were doing it at a very young age.
I was.
And tapping into social media as a tool at a very young age.
Before all this. Before what we see now.
It's before we see now.
I pioneered that shit.
You did. And I want to hear about the motivating factor behind that and where you were going with it and whether or not there are still semblances of that today, which is very obvious in how you work. But I'm curious about like what you've taken with you.
Yeah, well, this question couldn't be more timely because the reason I started this publication was because I had a really deep love for the news and journalism at a really young age. And I knew I wanted to study journalism my whole life, up until I went to school for journalism and was like, I'm actually going to become a makeup artist.
Slay. And we're going there. We're getting there.
We're getting there. We'll get there. But when I was in high school, I was on the school paper, The Charger, at Agora High School. And I was a staff writer my first year. And the second year, I was an op-ed editor. And what that means is I was the editor for the opinion section at the paper. And I wanted to publish 2 articles written by 2 different students defending their position and their stance on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
I love
it's a full circle moment here.
Full circle moment.
And this is why, but this is also, I mean, we'll get into, I'll talk about something else later, but this issue is it's very embedded in my experience, in my career, actually, internally. So this has been on my heart for a long time. And when I wanted to publish it, after that issue came out, my newspaper teacher, I don't even know what we would call her now. I think she was like the supervisor of the newspaper. She pulled me aside and she sat with me and she said, I don't want you to be part of this newspaper anymore. It didn't really give me a choice. And I was really upset because I felt like, this is not even my writing that I'm being punished for. This is like students' writing, and it's like really good. It's really good discourse. And we have a predominantly white community at my school. And let it be known that I grew up around the table of many Jewish families who have welcomed me into their home. It never really was. It's a no-brainer to me to love and be part of that community. And so for me, I was just really I was very confused by it all. And so that was my villain origin story, because after I got kicked off the paper, I went up to like one of my other teachers and I said, this is what happened. And this is someone who I really adored as a teacher. And he said, okay, well, if you need a space to have students unionize, create your own thing, you can always use my classroom and I can take the blow for that. And he was the best. I mean, what a gem. But basically that inspired me to create this like underground paper called Press Publications. And the idea of it was actually, it bounced off of the idea of op-ed. And what it was the idea was to collect citizen journalism and kind of put it all together in a place that's easy to digest. And we were going to have ideas like we were going to have publications, and I mean not publications, we were going to have artwork, and we were going to have like musicians, like emerging musicians.
Kind of like a zine.
Yeah, it was a zine.
Merging between a zine, yeah.
Exactly. And so we had like an amazing crew. Like I'm still friends with a lot of these people who put together and helped me put together this paper. I was the editor-in-chief. The only time I was an editor-in-chief was for my own publication. So it's giving Nepo baby of my own kind. Like I wasn't even,
and that's a major slay.
Major slay.
Who among us can say that?
No one. So I really love that for me. But that was the start of Press Publications. And unfortunately, by the time everything went into, we had one issue, we had some submissions. And by the time that it was coming to fruition, we all went to college. And that really took over. We weren't able to basically pass down the torch.
Right.
But it was such an amazing experience. And like I went to college, and actually that entire experience also motivated me to apply to the best journalism schools in the country, in the world. And then I ended up going to University of Missouri, Columbia, that has the #1 ranked journalism program in the country, aka the world, pretty much.
Slay. So something that I'm very interested in, for one, is like to kind of trail back to the experience, your villain origin story of having somebody look at you and say, not only am I punishing you for having an opinion that I'm assuming, that I'm actually projecting onto you. I actually do not know your business. But what I'm going to do is air out the fact that my greatest fear as somebody who controls information at this institution is to bottleneck it at the source and completely starve an opportunity for anybody to know the reality of the situation.
Right.
And I find that that tends to be the villain origin story for a lot of us who feel that the wool was pulled over our eyes, or that we were silenced at a really important at a time we were finding our voice. Because you learn to see the true evil in not allowing people to make choices for themselves with the information at hand.
Exactly.
Right? And like also just simply like not feeling like you are allowed to express yourself then requires years of having to dismantle that narrative. Right? That your voice is too loud, that you're too opinionated. That like you're not able to trust the people around you to be a proponent of information. Even like I feel like it creates this like paranoia where like in any space that where like any space that you enter, you now fear that like you are the greatest weapon in the room simply because you let yourself think. And like that can become, well, for one, like you can actually become a villain in any room because you feel the need to seek vindication. And I feel like I have experienced that a lot where like in the tarot, the card that represents air signs is the Queen of Swords. And one thing about the sword in spirituality is it tends to be, it's a symbol for the truth and for not mincing words, for saying what you mean and meaning what you say. But also a sword is something that can kill somebody. It's a very powerful tool. And I love that it makes that symbolism for language and for truth telling, because over time I find that those of us who are queens of swords, right? As a Gemini and Aquarius, you learn how to not soften your message, but to say it with a clarity that is intended for your audience.
Absolutely.
And like allowing empathy to be the soft landing place. It's not that you are like not telling the truth. It's not that you're unwilling to say what needs to be said. It's that you are saying it in with an intention of love. And I think that like also tends to be exactly how we learn how to express ourselves. Like I always say, like for me as somebody who's building a platform, like I describe myself as a Trojan horse because I know that like I am very warm and I'm very inviting and I like try to put love first because I want to be clear that like there is nothing that I am ever saying or promoting that I don't see with foresight and with vision as being a source for love. And even if you don't receive it now, you will receive it when you come into this truth. You're going to get this truth regardless.
That's right.
So I feel like that just like that is something that I'm seeing you come into very distinctly. I'm curious about how you go from that to becoming a makeup artist.
Well, funny story here because while all of the things were happening as a child with my parents' marriage, we traveled. Also, I just want to say we traveled for the entire time my parents were married and together, they traveled the world. And I went with them. I wasn't in school full time until I was in first grade. And
wow.
Yeah. And so honestly, love that for me too. I always say if I have kids, I really want them to experience, because I think that also we can look at how the addiction and the the turmoils of my parents' marriage like impacted me, but they also had so many incredible, colorful things in our life that also I really want to just shed a light on really quick, because I think that I think often we forget to bring those things up. And for me, the traveling aspect of my childhood and that closeness to my parents and my mom, my grandmother would often travel with us, and I had that insane, beautiful connection with her and my mom. The three of us were like the Three Musketeers. And anyways, just a little side note, but
no, I love that, because I feel that what you're describing in true Gemini sun and moon fashion is the duality of like the same experiences that can bring us, you know, traumatic experiences, a lot of pain, are also the source for our greatest joys and for the foundation for our joy moving forward.
Absolutely. And like one of the things that I loved doing while I was growing up and living with my mom and being around her was watching her get ready in the morning. And she had like the most like expansive counter of makeup. I'm talking like, you've been to my place, my couch, like longer than my couch. MAC, Chanel, Dior, like everything that was new that dropped hot in the market at that time in the 90s and early, she had it.
She was the market.
She was the market. I mean, she's still to this day, like she loves makeup. It gave me my love for makeup.
Yes.
And the times where I was on timeout, what do you think I did? I went to her makeup counter.
You were finding out how to be a hot
she's
girl.
like, I found little fingerprints in my MAC eyeshadows. And I'd be like, why is she in my stuff like that? But I was always playing around in her makeup.
So cute.
It was really a big part of my identity growing up, was playing around in makeup. And one night I had a Halloween play that I was part of in my elementary school. And I was a witch for the play. And I remember I came downstairs and my mom was like, where did you learn to glue eyelashes on? You're 8 years old. How did you do that? And she's like, and did you use my MAC?
I'm true to
She's
this.
like, did you use my MAC eyelashes? And I was like, I sure did. And what of it? And it honestly was perfect. And that's one of my specialties as a makeup artist, is putting on fake lashes on people, and also complexion.
I wish we had time for a tutorial, because we do need that.
One day we
do need that.
But
I love that.
That's where it came
from. I love that beauty ritual. And I also love what it sounds like to me, based on a lot of what you shared. And I had a very similar experience where I went through this journey of being like pre-law, deeply serious, was planning on becoming a politician.
Yeah.
I was voted most likely to be president in the yearbook.
Well, I was voted biggest lurk in high school.
Well, and that makes sense,
because I would troll people online.
She's still a detective.
I'm a detective.
If you give her an Instagram, and
I know everything.
Exactly. You
about
give her an
everyone.
Instagram, and the first letter of anybody's name, she will find it.
I'll find anything on anybody.
But yeah, it's like after kind of leading that early life path, I always say I had like an early life crisis, and I had this moment be like, what am I going to do? And I began inner child work before I had language or a context for it, because I remembered myself in the moments of joy that I had before responsibility and obligation for my family and my lineage took hold of my heart. And what I was doing in those moments. And I was in my room looking at the literal hundreds of editions of Teen Vogue and the writing that was inside of them, connecting beauty and sensory experience to huge world issues in a context that would empower young people, young hearts. I remember being in front of my grandma Rosie's vanity. I was known as Little Rosie. And looking at my image and thinking, I look so beautiful because I look like my grandmother.
Oh.
And playing with her Elizabeth Taylor white diamonds. Every single Black girl knows what it's like to be around the scent of white diamonds. And around all of her little potions and perfume bottles and like her makeup products. And just like, I remember the ritual of beauty felt like coming home to me.
Absolutely.
In particular, being like a young Black girl and a chubby young Black girl. I remember so many people saying to me, like, you have such a beautiful face, because they wanted to avoid the other things that they felt like were ugly.
Yeah.
But I really did carry that with me as I got
Yeah.
older. And like, I felt like even though there was a part of it that was a coping mechanism
Mhm.
for that which I knew the world didn't see as beautiful, I was able to look in the mirror and really, really felt beautiful, not just because of the vanity of it all,
Yeah.
but because it felt like a return to feeling loved in
Absolutely.
femininity
Yes.
and like the divinity of just taking care of oneself.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that I feel like there's a part of you that started doing that inner child work as well by being
Absolutely.
like, I remember playing. That's when I was playing.
That's when I was playing. And also, like, it's important to note that my mom's entire side of the family was involved in the beauty industry. Like,
Right.
my grandmother, my aunt, my mom's sister, is a hairdresser. She also does makeup. My grandmother owned a salon. Her sisters owned a salon. Like, they were always around the girls. And
This is your ancestral
this
right.
is my ancestral right. Exactly. That's correct. Because that's my mom's side of the family is where I have the most context. Also, where I spent the most time growing up and who I spent the most time with growing up. And I think that like the women in my family really created this gorgeous space. And like
beauty rituals are a huge thing in Iranian culture, right?
And just to like piggyback, I'm using corporate jargon here, but just
Absolutely.
to piggyback,
Circle back and follow up on that.
Yep. On your White Diamonds perfume, I think like the brown girl equivalent to that is Angel by Thierry Mugler. Like every brown girl was absolutely drowning in some auntie's Angel perfume because
you know what?
That's my favorite perfume to this day.
That is so funny because I remember meeting a girl my freshman year in college at the University of Texas, and she was Iranian.
Yeah.
And every single time I see her, I'd be like, what are you wearing? What are you wearing? And she'd be like, bitch, it's Angel.
It's
like,
Angel.
I told you. But that's so crazy because it never clicked for me that may be the source.
Angel.
And I love that.
Yep.
So now that we're talking about beauty, let's switch into some hot girl shit.
Yeah, that's where I like to be.
You did kind of nod. You granted a nod to this earlier about how your experiences in caring for yourself in opposition to maybe the love or the feeling of safety that you didn't get from your father, how that's impacted your dating life.
Yes.
You and I both have a curse that is stumbling, falling, tripping into the arm of a Scorpio.
You know,
so let's talk about it. It is Scorpio season. Let's talk about it now.
Okay,
let's talk about it now.
I also just want to quickly say we were supposed to record this podcast a few weeks ago, and the reason we couldn't was because there was a pipe that burst.
That's right.
And Scorpios, like
as
you know, you told me rule the underworld.
That's exactly
which includes pipes, sewage.
That's right. And there's a reason why. And there's a reason why Scorpios are connected to sewage.
And we don't need to complete the sentence.
They drudge up shit that nobody wants to see. And they are sometimes the shit that nobody wants to see.
Absolutely.
And also, mind you, both of us were going through heartbreak with a Scorpio.
Yeah, we are.
We are. And it's
always the case. I don't even want to give it any airtime.
It's not that. Because the thing is, ultimately, it's not about them, right?
No, it's absolutely not.
And I think that that's actually what Scorpio season and the Scorpio message does best.
Yeah.
Is that it makes you want to choose the distraction.
Totally.
The thing that's over there, which is the person that you say hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
The avoidance of somebody else. The ways in which they can't see you.
Yes.
And in reality, they are merely a mirror. For all the ways that you don't want to see yourself, for all the ways that you don't want to take care of yourself, for all the ways that you are emotionally unavailable yourself.
That's correct.
And we as air signs do know a thing or two about avoiding shit that we think is ugly.
Absolutely. And I also just want to say one of the main things that I've learned this year just about patterns in my choice of people that I'm interested in or want to date or want to be with or whatever it may be in that department. I always chose past tense, chose people who were like serious for no reason.
Because you're you're the most deeply unserious
I'm like,
bitch I've
I
ever
want
met
to
before.
giggle. I want to laugh.
Hee hee ha ha.
I want to kick my heels up and I want to have a Cheeto puff.
Have a Cheeto puff.
I want to have a Cheeto puff and a bonbon.
I'm not trying to go through the most traumatic experience of my life with you.
Please be serious. I'm like, I'm realizing this now and I'm like, why did I always choose someone who is like a little bit mysterious, a little bit unavailable, a little bit unattached? Because I do think, even though I have avoided parts of myself, I think that I'm an extremely attached, an extremely present, and an
Very.
extremely fun and a warm person, actually, to my core.
Very.
And I don't believe in opposites attract right in this situation. I think opposites attract in other ways and
Completely.
forms. But I'm just like, I'm a very deeply unserious person, as you say.
Absolutely.
And so I need someone who has a light and who has like an exciting vantage point in life and has an
And who wants to
exciting
meet you in your
perspective.
light.
Exactly.
Yes.
So for me, it's like really this year has really allowed me to bury that.
Babe, bury it dead. Don't go 6 feet, go
under.
10.
Yeah, exactly.
Go 10, bitch.
Go 10 just in case.
That's right.
Because
in case there's a flood.
Absolutely. And I think that like, even if the people I was ever interested in or dating were not drug addicts, I've never dated anyone with an addiction.
Right.
That I know of. But even though I didn't date those people, I think a lot of those tendencies showed up in their behavior.
Absolutely.
And I was always trying to piece together things that didn't need to be pieced together.
No.
Because that's what my problem-solving brain was trying to do in figuring out, like, you know,
Right.
if I want to just jump back a couple years, you know, when I was a child, like, okay, why hasn't dad come home yet?
You
or like,
were naturalized.
where is he? And
trauma was naturalizing you
Yes.
into a bridge.
Yes.
Where like
For
to
sure.
be loved
Yeah.
and to find love is to create a bridge between
Yeah.
what you're not getting and who you are begging to give it to you.
Yes.
And you're hoping that if you create that bridge, eventually the two of you will meet.
Yeah.
Right? Your needs and the person that you think will be able to
Yes.
show up for them will
Yeah.
meet. But those often with those people, those two worlds shall never meet.
Yeah.
And I think it's very beautiful that you're able to make that connection. I also feel that there is often a part of us, as somebody who has also I have found myself in my younger years gravitating towards people who I thought were deep, but were actually dark.
Thank you
And
for saying
who
that.
think that
That's
the
what it
only way
is.
to be deep is to be dark. And in fact, I have found that the deepest wells in my life, the people who I can, you know, bring my cup to and say, will
Yeah.
you fill this, please? I need it for another day,
Yeah.
are the most light, kind, warm,
Yes.
joyful, sun-like people.
Yes.
And it's because they are able to shine their
Yeah.
energy onto the dark side of the moon.
Yes.
That's how the
Yeah.
astronomy works.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? And they don't feel the need to create darkness where like depth can actually be quite clear. It
Yeah.
doesn't need to be murky.
Absolutely.
It doesn't need to be like conflict driven. It doesn't need to be uncertain.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, I feel like a part of myself, what I had to kind of come to terms with is that what actually was happening there was not an opposite attract,
Mhm.
but that those people were a mirror for the things that I felt like maybe people wouldn't love me for. Like,
Mm.
I feel like my own depth, I was having a hard time wanting to be seen in by
Yeah.
people that I was looking for love with.
Yeah.
And that was a challenge for me. But
Yeah.
the more that I allowed myself to go deep, I was like, I actually don't need a partner to find me there because
No.
I know her well.
I know
I
her
know
well.
I know the darkest parts of me, the seediest, the most shadowy and sinewy
For
part of
sure.
me. I know that well. I need somebody who can find me in the light and who wants to rejoice with me there.
Absolutely.
And I often come back to a piece of advice that my mother, who was for 20 years a victim of domestic abuse,
Mm.
I remember her always saying to me, like, because she had a partner who hated her light, who hated seeing people revel in how magnetic she was, she would say, find somebody who smiles often, who wants to see you smile often.
Yeah.
And as a very smiley bitch, as often the smiliest bitch in the room,
You were always smiling.
I have never forgotten that.
And I love it.
I had never forgotten that. And like now I feel like that is what I am actually looking for
Yeah.
is the other smiliest bitch in the room. So we can be little
Absolutely.
Walmart greeters together, bro.
Yeah, that's what it's like, it's not like I want to stop deeping everything.
Yeah, it's
Please,
not deep,
it's not
bro.
deep. Like, let's just have a good time. Like, and then I feel like what you were saying earlier about, you know, the darkest parts of yourself. It's like what I don't like is like if somebody knows me in my fullness, which I feel like often my closest friends do.
Mhm.
I really don't feel like I really can say I'm just thinking right now. I can really say that my friends know me in my fullness. There's
Yes.
nothing that's hiding with me. I'm really like open about everything. And oftentimes like in a situation where you're dating someone you know really well, they often know those sides of you
Mhm.
too. One thing I can't stand is people who are trying to be mysterious for the sake of being mysterious. To me, it's not a
It's not hot.
motivation. It's not something that I'm like, oh, I need to I want to unlock the code here. I'm trying to figure it out. I want to make sense of it. It just infuriates me because it's like this is not that deep. Like, what was your
Exactly.
favorite color as a kid? Like, you don't
Just
need
say
to
it
be
to me.
weird about it. Like, mine was purple, and that's just something I'm ashamed of now. I would never
No.
wear purple anymore.
Well, okay, period. And we can dig into that at a different
Well,
time.
you know what I mean?
No, babe, I do know what you mean. I
Like,
do feel that
please.
in my own experience, emotional maturity has brought me to a place where I am no longer attracted to, nor does my pussy get wet for mystery, because
Absolutely.
clarity is my safety.
I know.
Clarity is my safety.
In every aspect of life too, by the way, at work, with my family, with my
Yes.
mom. The more I grow up, the more I'm learning about my mom when she was my age. And it's such a special experience. And like to me, just that openness is so valuable and it has brought us closer together.
Yes.
And like whenever I talk to my dad or my aunt or my cousins, like, and we just have these moments of like, oh, that's what that was. It wasn't what I thought it was. And like we're unveiling these like things that had a veil on them for so long.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, literally, that's great.
No.
Now I know more. I'm not ever
Yes.
gonna and I for one am not someone who likes to use people's experiences against them. I don't think anyone
No.
thinks they do, but I genuinely think for me, whenever somebody, even if I dislike them as a person, they show me who they are and they live in their truth and they're living what they're saying, I have nothing but love for that person.
That's right.
Actually, that's where I think I'm a true Gemini, is the more information I know about somebody, even if I disagree with them on a lot of things.
Right.
And I don't agree with their approach on life. If I see their wholeness or as much of their wholeness as I can't help but actually have love for that person.
You can accept it.
I can accept
You can
it.
accept
and
it.
I have love.
And
I actually have love for
acceptance
it.
is love.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the thing.
Exactly.
Acceptance is love.
Exactly.
It's like I don't need to be a part of your salvation.
No.
I don't need to free you.
No.
However, your truth here and now has set me free. Because with that information, I can make choices for my best interests.
Yes.
And thank you for that.
Yes.
But mystery will never allow space for safety in that way.
Smoke and mirrors, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Please be serious.
I mean, period. It's point blank. So now I want to ask you, final question.
Oh my God.
I know. Can you believe it? I know, babe. We could be here for 4 more hours.
We really could.
By your definition and your personal experience, what is like the recipe for being a cycle breaker? 3 to 5 ingredients.
Oh my God.
That are Bita flavored. If cycle breaking was Bita flavored, Bita bunny, what would it taste like?
This is very difficult.
And I know a lot of people watch and listen would love to taste it.
Thank you. Well, breaking a cycle really requires a few things.
Yes.
Oh my God, this is actually the hardest question I've ever answered, I think.
Well, I feel like you've answered it. And you've answered it
you've
answered it in the interview.
I think that leaving everything you know and that gives you comfort is a really massive thing.
Period.
For me, moving to New York was an absolute leap of faith. And it has been the greatest gift of my life. I fought to get here. So that's one thing. Leaving the things that are comforting to you is a big part of it. The other thing is identifying how your family and the closest people to you have broken a cycle, and
Honoring what's
looking
already been
inside.
done.
Well, also looking inward to see like where you can contribute, and like where, like honoring what's been done, and also recognizing that you are not the first person to break a cycle, but you're ready to break another cycle.
Thank you so much for saying that. I will say I saw a TikTok not that long ago that said, just because your mom didn't break all the cycles doesn't mean that she
Yeah.
didn't break any.
Oh my God, yes.
And I feel like the greatest gift that we can give ourselves as people who are creating a new path,
Yeah.
blazing a new path, is recognizing that we are not alone, because even the tough stuff
Yeah.
we have been handed, and that's why we're strong.
For sure.
I love that.
Both of my parents, along with my grandmother and my other family members, they're extreme cycle breakers. So I feel like I have I have big shoes to fill here. I really will say that I've like nothing but love and respect for my family in that way.
A family of icons.
They're all extreme. Like my grandma was the breadwinner.
Yes.
Taught women in prison how to cook, sew, be part of society. She said, "I'm coming and I'm gonna help."
I love it.
Yeah. So there's that.
Any final ingredients?
Oh my gosh, there's so
Babe,
many
those
things.
are two great ones.
Those are two great ones.
And I feel like share, love, and eat good are also great ones.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's your truth.
That's my truth.
And get into that inner child.
Yeah, I think definitely
that's your fight song.
Figuring out the things, places, smells, sights, sounds that you loved as a child, and actually bringing those with you to the now. I think that like that is the ultimate rule book I'm living by right now. Is, would my inner child, like, does this tickle me in a way that's like my inner child is buzzing? And why is it that? Like, why did I love the ocean so much as a kid? Why did I love these things? And actually staying very close to that and riding for the things that you loved as a kid, really identifying it and riding for it.
Making
unapologetically. Like, I was very sensitive as a baby, as a kid, as an adult. I'm very sensitive. I've always shied away from that. But now that I'm embracing my sensitivity, that allows me to really be in touch with the sounds and the colors and the food I loved, and just kind of come back into myself. I'm like trying not to be in denial that I'm very sensitive.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love you.
This was an honor.
Thank
I love
you for being here.
Thank you for being you, and for being my...
You're my girl.
Gorgeous friend.
My gorgeous, gorgeous girl.
My gorgeous girl.
Hold my hand.
I love you.
Thank you guys so much for listening again.
Thank you.
Another incredible episode. Free my girls from situationships, and free Palestine until it's backwards.
And don't date any Scorpios.
Signing
off. They don't deserve
now.
it.
Live, laugh, love. This podcast and every episode is produced and edited by Joey Geballa. Music by Sufi Hamilton. And of course, the voice of Kendra Austin. See you soon.